Aloha. This is Representative Barbara Marumoto, and I'm here today with Minority Leader Gene Ward. And today we're going to take you through our typical morning and floor session. We were quite busy today. I think Economic Development met 3 times, and I was there all the time. And there was a briefing, joint committees on consumer protection in the House and the Senate about a federal bill that came out. So welcome, Gene.
Thank you, Barbara. It's a pleasure to say a day in the life of a legislator, because I think probably no show has ever gone through the actual OD. We're going to actually go through the OD of what we've done.
That's a good idea.
But can I give kind of a preliminary comment about, some people think that because you're a Republican, that there's always a division of the House when you have any bill. Most of the things that we went through today, and we'll go in detail, are non-controversial. I'd say 80%, 90% are basically management decisions, how to manage employees better, how to do policy stuff. But it's the 10% that are really the difference. So when they say, oh, Marumoto voted 90% with the Democrat, it's not saying that you're a Democrat. It's saying that most of these issues, most of our stuff in the legislature is like adjusting the hands on a clock. It's not really that substantive. It's fine-tuning a government that's been running for over 100 years. And people get the wrong impression that, you know, there's a divide. If you vote together, you're somehow disloyal.
That's right. Most of the time we vote all together. But there's a few bills that we feel that require a little more discussion, and we have some questions about. So we try and point out the deficiencies in some of the bills and get some more information. So sometimes we've got to slow down bills as a part of the loyal opposition, and it's quite an educational process. We learn a lot in the proceedings. So anyway, this morning with all the hearings, we have some pre-digests that our staff does for us on some of the bills. They give
pre-digest, meaning?
They give us some indication of whether they're good or not.
So we actually have them digested. It's kind of like cliff notes on all the bills in the legislature, which really means they're really busy doing a lot of details, because we're supposed to be fast learners. We've got to be able to pick up basically 1,500 bills at a pace between now and May and know really all about them.
Then after the hearings, after we hear all the testimony, we change our minds on a lot of the bills, don't we?
And that's the good part about when, I call it the marketplace of ideas. When you go down on the floor, you hear what other people think about it. And I think that's why there's 3 readings in the House before then goes over to the Senate. The Senate does it 3 times, comes back, then they kind of get their differences in the middle. So we really have a deliberative process. Democracy is, I'm impressed with it, the way it works.
It works well most of the time. But anyway, after the hearing, we have our staff digest the key bills, significant bills, bills that we have expressed interest in or maybe even disapproval. And then we get the digests, and they provide them to us when we go down to the floor session, which is every day at noon in the House.
12 o'clock.
Sometimes the digests aren't all collated and copied for us. And when we're in hearings until 11:30, almost sometimes 12, we hardly have time to read the digest before we have to vote on them.
I've asked Speaker either to move the session back a bit or move the committee chairs from having so close to 12 o'clock. The issue, and I want to make it a complimentary one, is that we really digest these bills, understand what the bills are before we go on the floor. We read all the bills. We know how to argue the bills. It's not just that we go out and we just sort of sit like bumps on the log for the first and second reading. We actually, the minority is known for speaking up on the second bills because we want to flash what are the bad points of those bills. And I understand, Barbara, you're going to go through some of these on the OD.
Exactly. You know, we had 21 pages.
21 pages.
Agenda, maybe 100 bills. And, you know, on page 3, there was one on which would abolish junior kindergarten.
For those out there with kids in age 1 to 5, this is all about you. Barbara, what was the issue, and what did Representative Thielen say about it?
Well, Cynthia Thielen of Kailua said that there should be something in place, perhaps a pre-kindergarten program set before we abolish junior kindergarten. So she made a very good point on that.
One thing that's undeniable is that the brain of a child is formed by age 5 up to 80% of it. And you know, the kids that are starting out with a disadvantage, it's between age 1 and 5 which there's a corrective period. After the corrective period, the environment and the hereditary stuff kind of melds together, but it's that first 5 years. And I'm not talking about the nanny state, I'm talking about giving these kids the best education they can for the first 5 years so they have the confidence to go when they get into the competitive system in public schools or otherwise, they can hold their own. Because people who can't do educationally well, they feel inferior and then they start acting physical and aggressive and project themselves in a way that unfortunately dims their life chances, and they earn $1 million less per year than those who do end up getting their education.
Well, you didn't say that, but maybe for next speech you should. You know, there was a transportation bill which would have raised the fee. This is on page 8.
Okay, so you're proving my point. We've gone 8 pages and only 2 have so far been controversial.
That's true.
Just so when we said that most of these are
this
not.
has to do with rental cars, and it would keep the fee at a very high rate and keep it from sunsetting back to $3. And I believe it went up to $8.50 or $4.50.
If you put the 2 fees together, it's almost $7, $8 a day by just getting in the car. Nothing to do with what the rental fee on top of that is, or the gas, or the insurance.
So we pay it when we go to Neighbor Islands.
Barbara, I think both of us voted against that last year because it was actually oppressive in the amount. We want to encourage tourists. We don't want to discourage them. But this fee will have reverted back to $3 rather than $3.50 rather than $4.50, and that's not good policy. We got to keep ourselves visitor friendly. Obviously, we're a higher cost destination than most, but this is getting to be where it's a bit excessive.
The next bill had to do with toll roads, building toll roads.
What page was that?
That was right underneath it.
Okay.
And this one, let's see, I might have voted in opposition, but I know Cynthia Thielen did, and Corinne Ching, and Mark Takai.
You know, I had mixed feelings on this one, Barbara, because I've lived in many countries where there are toll roads, and it is efficient, and the other roads, which are free, doesn't force one to use these roads, but in terms of, I think it was Representative Takai or someone said, if you got to get to the airport in 5 minutes, if you had an alternative that cost you another $1 or something, probably you would do it. So this is not saying we're going to have toll roads in Hawaii, but it's where if the opportunity came where somebody wanted to come and build a road and then charge a reasonable fee, I think that's an alternative we have to look at.
Well, Representative Johansson had a very good amendment which was adopted in this bill, that if there's no alternative road, then there would not be a fee charged to it. No toll
that makes
road.
good sense.
Very good. There was about 6 WRs on it.
Representative Johansson is a member of the Minority Caucus, correct?
Correct, and also on the Transportation Committee.
We want to claim his good brain.
Yeah. Okay, on page 10, there was some bills of interest to us, and it had to do with collective bargaining, and bargaining the amount of the health benefits. And so this would require arbitration and to be settled that way. Now, we both know that the EUTF, the Employers Unions Trust Fund, which handles the health benefits, it has a large unfunded liability.
How big is it? 7, 8, 9, almost $10 billion. It's almost scary the way that they brought that out in the Budget and Finance briefing with the Finance Committee last week. It's scary. It's in the billions of dollars, and we have no plan to correct that.
Well, I think other personnel benefits might have cost that much, and maybe the whole unfunded liability might have been over $70 million. It was simply phenomenal.
It was spooky, actually.
It was, and so, you know, I really had reservations on this particular bill because I think we have to take extraordinary measures to address that.
If I remember correctly in the briefing, they said if we do nothing over the next 20 years, essentially half of our budget is just going to be funding health benefits. And you can't fund a government by having health benefits take up 48% of the budget. Right now, education is a priority. Right now, the safety net is the priority. And the way that this one is structured, there's not a solution, but there's got to be one, and this is one that it's going to come to roost if we don't handle it. Barbara, what I want to do is back up a little bit in the sense that we've gone through now 10 pages, and I just wanted to note for the people who might be interested in the process of how we went through each page, the speaker essentially will call out the bill number and the standing committee number, and he'll ask if there's anyone who has any comments or, because this is a voice vote, it's essentially where comments with reservations or no's would be registered. Otherwise, it's a voice vote at the end where people will just say aye, and it's like 21 pages in one aye. You vote one shot. So if you don't stand up and speak, you know, you're going to go on record voting for some bad legislation.
And you've got to express your thoughts on it, your reservations or changes you'd like to see. Then the next committee will be aware of some, you know, your insights.
And did you notice how when Cynthia and you and others who have spoken on these, it kind of jiggles the memory of those who are in those committees. It flags it and they say, yeah, I agree or I disagree on that, because there are so many bills that come by, and because, as I said earlier, we try as thoroughly as possible to read and to prepare ourselves to speak before we go on the floor. So when we go on the floor, it's kind of a wake-up call for others on the other side, as much as it is for our own group.
You know, there's some bills that we're philosophically opposed to. And on page 13,
page 13,
we're up against some new special funds that they're forming. And some new fees that they'd like to enact, or old fees that they'd like to raise. So there was one on vital statistics. And I think you stood up and said something
I said
on
a few words on that, Barbara, with strong reservations, the way that we're going to charge another 25% for a certificate for marriage, a certificate for divorce, death, etc. And that's if you just go and ask for a certificate. But I was flashing back as I read this bill and got familiar with the testimony. The Hawaiian roll is going to be called for those who are in the process of forming the Hawaiian nation. And for one to be a qualified voter, you have to get a copy of the birth certificate. It just happens to be that this birth certificate is going from $10 to $15, which means a 50% increase. If I'm Hawaiian and I say, you guys are passing a bill exactly the time that 120,000 of us are going to have to come and pay an extra $5, 120,000 times 5, that's a lot. That's $500,000.
Yes.
I mean, $500,000.
And when somebody dies, you need several death certificates.
Exactly. So this is punitive, and I will quote someone of the testimonial. The one that stood out in my mind is this is kind of like the Hawaiian poll tax, which, and we know poll taxes are very dangerous and historically discouraging people for getting engaged in the democratic process.
The next page was marriage fees to get a marriage license. This is going to discourage marriage.
This was a no. I actually stood up a little bit longer on this one. I actually voted no on this.
I did likewise.
This is a biggie, $60 to $100. In case those of you who are married, you didn't realize that marriage has gone up. Probably when you got married, it was even cheaper than that. But to go $40 increase, I mean, that's a 65% increase just overnight. And Barbara, one of my suspicions is probably not purposely trying to discourage marriage, even though people are not getting married today, hardly at all, to the extent that there are, I think, just a small amount of people who are unmarried or cohabitating than there are actually married couples. If you get in the older generation, it's different. But we have said at the beginning, and Speaker and Governor said, there's no new taxes coming this session. There are not going to be any unbalanced budget because we don't have to raise taxes. But if you remember the poem of A Rose by Any Other Name, a fee by any other name, when it gets so big, becomes a tax by the way it's going to hit the people. And that's why I'm concerned that this may be a tax in disguise.
There's a myriad
because we're not going to do taxes. We got fees all over the place that are hitting. So the marriage tax is a big one that's on its way.
Well, let's see. Let's go to page 14. We are on page 14.
Page 14.
And, Standing Committee Report 352 had to do with helmets.
And
you know, I have always been trying to encourage helmet use on two-wheeled vehicles. And so this one came out of Health Committee and required anyone over 62 to wear a helmet. So let's see if that gets past Transportation Committee, or maybe it may go to Finance Committee.
Barbara, a lot of my constituents are concerned. Why don't we actually require a helmet law?
Well,
do you know the history of that?
I think the federal government used to require it, and then they removed the requirement. And I think if we did enact it again, we would get some federal funds. Transportation
for highway safety funds or something like that. But my understanding was in the early 80s, there was a helmet bill that says you motorcyclists will have to wear a helmet. Or no, or was it in the 90s? And then there was such a hue and cry, and all the leather jacket and otherwise huge turnout came. And I remember there was just a cowering and a flip within hours that bill just turned upside down and went away. But the data is that this is $1.5 million a year that these head injuries are causing taxpayers to pay.
Plus the tragedy of having a traumatic brain injury, something most people have to live with and their families for the rest of their lives.
And Barbara, I'm not talking theoretically. I, as a Peace Corps volunteer, rode a motorcycle for 2 years, a fast motorcycle, and had 3 accidents. And I know when Peace Corps says, you wear your helmet or you're out of here. Right now, Peace Corps, by the way, since those early days when I was in, bans motorcycles. You get on a motorcycle, you get sent home.
Oh.
It's that serious because it's that dangerous. Most people don't see you, most people don't respect you, and oftentimes it's where if you have a helmet on, at least you have a running chance. So I commend you on your stick-to-itiveness in reintroducing this. I think
year
it was
after year after year.
Well, you know, it's persistence. Sometimes that's the only way legislation goes because it's protecting people against themselves. Now, on the other hand, if we're going to protect you from sugar, a lot of people saying, well, we should put a sugar tax on you. Or people saying, no, let them on their own. This is one of those, what's the government's obligation to promote the general welfare and the safety of the people? This one to me is so proven by data.
Yeah, you know, to go back to traffic safety, and I'm digressing, I've always been for ATV safety also, all-terrain vehicles. And just
that's the
last
four-wheel
week,
ones, right?
Yeah, just last week a policeman was demonstrating how to be safe in one, and he flipped and ended up on a parked car. I mean, they're very dangerous.
That wasn't a YouTube you saw, was it? That was actually Honolulu?
It was in Honolulu. It was reported in the newspaper. So yesterday, the Transportation Committee did pass out a bill that would require helmets on ATVs and also prohibition against anyone under 16 from riding in on ATVs. So that's moving. It's
okay, so that'll give you momentum for what you're doing.
And I'm sure it will be digested.
Sometimes people have got to die at an intersection before they get the traffic light. This is another example of that.
Well, on page 15, there was one on allowing dogs in restaurants.
That's a groundbreaker.
And everybody voted for it.
A groundbreaker.
And Representative Crenshaw stood up and spoke in favor of it.
Dogs have become such a part of our community. I know 40%, well, in Hawaii Kalama Valley, which I represent, there's probably 40 to 50% of the people there having either a dog, a pet, or multiple dog, pet, and other animals. And it's to the point where not giving dogs their due, because some are treated exactly like family. Case in point, I jogged with my dog. A lot of my constituents remember my dog waved on the highway with me. My white German Shepherd with a red lei, loved to watch cars. And I didn't fall, it was an experiment. You know, bring my dog and they can, because this was my first run. And Dato in Malay means honorable sir, loved to watch cars. And then I had some constituents say, hey, you better put water down there for that dog. It looks like you're, being uncruel.
Oh.
But it was where my dog waved on the highway for a number of years, was my jogging partner for 15 years. And now this is saying, look, if you want to bring the dog in these locations, it's okay. Do you think it's going to pass all the way, or what's your sense of
it will go to the Judiciary Committee, along with several other pet bills, bills to restrict dog meals, puppy meals, and it's always interesting because people weigh in on these animal bills. In fact, we got so many emails, mainly from the mainland. Maybe there was over 1,000 one day last week. Practically shut the whole computer system down.
It's another dimension of going through these 21 pages of bills. Some of these bills are just magnets of opposition or magnets for them. And because of the internet age, it's not only your district, in my district, that's going in, the whole state of Hawaii. Then, as you just said, something the mainland has really ponied up a lot of opinions on what we should do. We haven't got international emails yet, though, have we?
Not yet. It's once in a while. But,
Okay.
Okay, and then at the bottom of page 15, there was one relating to birth certificates. And this is very interesting because we were told that if you surgically change your gender, you may change your birth certificate. And this bill was slightly different. This one allowed you to change it if you were, I don't know, emotionally changed gender or...
You know, I didn't read the details on that one. I only saw that in the language that it was striking out and replacing this one, it's already in statute if you do get a surgical, physical sex change.
That's right.
You already have the law to have your birth certificate changed. But I can remember one of the discussions was referring back to the Olympics when somehow the Russians were winning all these races and they thought what they claimed to be women were actually men. And I mean, I doubt people are going to have a sex change so they can win a race. But that was one of the differences here.
There was 3 minority members that voted with reservations, and with reservations is a yes vote, but they have concerns. So Gil Riviere, George Fontaine, and Kren Cheng voted with reservations. So that's going to be an interesting one, and it's going
And this is
to...
only second reading, and your viewers should know that the third reading is when the rubber meets the road in terms of the real debate, an actual roll call vote, or voting with not just an aye, but actually voting with actually head count.
Well, it means it passes the House and goes over to the Senate, so that's what third reading means. Well, can we skip over to page 19?
Okay, page 19.
Yeah, the top of the agenda on page 19 had to do with a living wage. And there was also a section on something called card check. Perhaps you'd like to explain what card check...
Well, card check is now the law. Card check is basically a postcard which, if you circulate among the members of your establishment, workplace, and they all sign on to form a union. The law says now you are unionized. In heretofore, in the past, it was where you had to have a secret ballot, a voting process, a group rather than just an individual one. And that is not clear in this bill if that's really what they're trying to get at, or the living wage, and what is a living wage defined as, because no one is really paying the $7.25 minimum wage now.
The card check bill, does that pertain, the law now, does it pertain to all businesses or only certain larger businesses?
Yeah, it's the larger businesses that are, I think it's 5 million and above. This one may take it down even to a lower, smaller size, or a threshold that's
maybe it might have
smaller.
been 50. Was the
50 employees, that's usually a cutoff from big to smaller also.
I don't recall, but we'll have to take a closer look. It's coming to the Finance Committee. We both sit on Finance.
You know, in fact, that's a good point. We should mention that some of our caucus are more familiar and more articulate on these bills because they have sat in on those committee hearings. They are the ones who are assigned to that. How many committees have we got? 18 committees, right? 18 committees. So there's a lot of bills of which 8 of us have 2, 3, 4 committees. As you said, you had 4 hearings this morning. But what about our colleague Sam Sloan? He's one guy in the Senate. There's one Republican in the Senate. The only place in the United States where there's one Republican in the Senate, and he sits on all the committees. You want to talk about a quick learner?
He does a good job too. The second bill on that page had to do with the EUTF and the Part B Medicare reimbursements.
Now, do people understand you're speaking English? I don't think most people will know that.
Well, those of you who are over 60, whatever, when you start to get Medicare, you pay a premium. They call that the Part B, and that pays for your Medicare. When it comes to public employee retirees, the state reimburses you for that, and this would have eliminated it, but only for new employees.
And as Representative Takai, I believe, said on the floor today, that was an agreement between the retirees and the government when they said, well, look, you retirees are over 65. We're going to shift you over to Medicare. We're no longer going to insure you as they heretofore had been doing. And by the way, we're going to put you on a different policy, but we'll pay your premium. and that's the Part B, which is $100 a month or
State was hoping to save
something like
money.
that.
And
Which they did, I
suppose this
think.
won't really take effect for like 25 years. There's some people
Yeah,
who
there's
may
going to be a
40 or
minimal
so.
amount of cash saved by this, but it's a small beginning. And some are for it, some are against it, but it won't kick in until next year for anybody who's not now in government who will get into government.
Yeah, but even then, when it takes effect, will it save the state money, or how much will health premiums be if we don't have Medicaid?
That's
Medicare?
true. And well, the big wild card, Barbara, is the National Health Policy, Obamacare. We don't know what that is, but I think this is a mild version of what the governor last year tried to do, was to make it here and now, changing benefits, and those who are retirees or on this program of Medicare
Okay.
B got very upset.
We have 1 minute left. I'm going to give you
No.
a chance to talk about
Oh,
the
my
state
goodness.
bank. And whose bill is this?
Barbara, we're only on page
recall.
21. Well, actually, this was
Sorry.
about an hour inside of the session, but I want people to know that their government is in the process of forming a state bank with your taxpayers' money, and we use the model of North Dakota as the example of what farmers were using for a $2 million capitalization. We would have to put in $3 billion, and the use of it is, and get this, is to buy out all those toxic mortgages. Which means there's no FDIC. It's you, the taxpayer, that's going to have to pay that. So be alert to that. 21 pages. We got probably another 3 or 4 agendas this big that'll be coming in the next few weeks before it goes over to the Senate, and then the compromise come back to us, and we'll get back to you. But thank you,
There's a
Barbara.
new federal bill on mortgage foreclosures. Hawaii will get $71 million, so we'll see how this changes all these bills. But anyway, it was very nice talking to you, Minority Leader Gene Ward, and this is Representative Barbara Marumoto. This is Better Government, and we wish you aloha, and thank you for spending a day in the life of 2 legislators. Aloha.